Hello, everyone. We are inviting you all to listen our session. We're going to have a little chat about the Méliès mystery that we put on streaming in Kundurama with Turkish subtitles in collaboration with Lobster Film and Arte. I hope many of you have already had a chance to see it, to watch it. I'm Buse, the Managing Artistic Director of Beykoz Kundura, one of the remarkable industrial heritage sites of Istanbul. Of course, when it comes to sense of cultural heritage, I must say that we also pursue a curatorial policy on cinema reflecting its value like in cultural memory and heritage. So that's why every year in October, we celebrate the Audiovisual Heritage Day of UNESCO with a handpicked film. And apparently, we aim to create this awareness by bringing these inspirational sources and rare finds, stories to our local audience. And this documentary film depicts so well this journey of revival, a lost film, and creating a portraiture of Georges Méliès that we all know as an inventor of special effects and like many other techniques in filmmaking in history. Actually, like the moment that it had touched me in the film was like hearing his voice while telling us his experience at the film screening of Lumiere Brothers. So anyway, we will talk all about them in our session. Our foremost guest is Serge Bromberg from Lobster Film in Paris, and he's the founder, director of Lobster Film, but actually one of the creators of this documentary film. For me, like Serge, you're inspirational figure, you know, and passionate personage for me, dedicated to all this search of for lost treasures and bring them to the life, to present again. And so we will hear more, all the details from you about this process. And of course, our other guest is, as many of you know, Elif Rongen-Kaynakçı from iFilm in Netherlands, the silent film creator. And she's also one of our curatorial advisor of Kundura Sinema. So when I feel lost as a creator, she is the one who showed me the right way. In summertime, we had a long chat in Kundura about possible future projects. We dream about 2024, all the exhibitions, go on, keep dreaming. And she recommended me strongly to screen Méliès' film that Serge made. So this is how our paths crossed again. And I can't imagine this session obviously held without Elif. And also I had a chance to meet with Serge at Sinemanın Fransız, and I had already mentioned to him as well, I had adored his show with Jetty, Dinosaur, Vincent McKay animation. So this interactive film that creates double layers of sensorial aspect of cinema in a sense, before sound invention of sound. So we will go back to this early era of cinema and we rediscover the story of Méliès altogether.
Yes, well, you know, the story of Méliès is a rather simple story. It's the story of a man who wanted to become a magician at the end of the 1890s and 1880s. He bought a magic theater, the Théâtre Robert Houdin in Paris, and started doing tricks on stage and got training in England. He spoke fluent English. And one day, because this was in the Paris district where near the opera, and one day he met Louis Lumière, and Louis Lumière told him, well, you know, Mr. Méliès, I know you're very interested in tricks and things that are visually fascinating. I think I have something that will stun you. And Méliès said, well, if it's one of your projected slides or things, I mean, I've seen that already many times. No, come over. And it was December 28, 1895. And that's how Georges Méliès attended the first public screening of cinema ever. And of course, he was flabbergasted, totally surprised, and decided that instantly that this would be an addition of value to his theatrical stage show. one stage magic trick, then one film, then another trick, then another film. So it would be like a mix that you would attend at the Théâtre Robert Houdin. But when he asked for buying a camera, Lumière told him, no, this has no commercial future. This is just a scientific invention, and we do not sell. By saying this, it's quite likely that Louis Lumière and his brother Auguste kind of triggered the career of Georges Méliès, because Méliès couldn't buy one of those cameras. So he had one design that was very primitive in England. And because that camera was very primitive, one day in 1896, he was shooting the opera and he was like rolling the camera. And then all of a sudden the camera blocks and he kind of repairs everything and then resumes filming. And when he watched the film, he realized that there was a bus coming into the screen. And then at the moment the camera got stuck, the bus, of course, disappears. And all of a sudden, it's replaced by, how do you say, a coffin truck, for dead, to convey dead bodies. And when he saw that transformation, which was accidental, he thought, oh, by stopping the camera and then resuming filming, I can make things disappear or reappear, which is, of course, a very simple special effect today. But in 1896, it was just something beyond belief. And then because Méliès was a magician, he started inventing many, many tricks. And he became the first magician of cinema, who made actually during his very short career, from 1896 to 1912, 1913, he made 520 films and always experimenting new stuff and things like that. But always, as you said, Buse, with one point of view. It was not really cinema in the way that it was always in his studio in Montreuil. It was a camera filming a stage. So basically, we were watching the performance of actors on a stage with sets, but there was no, like cutting or going from one outdoor scene to another, one setting to another. We were always on the same set. And that's what is so particular with Méliès, and that's how you can recognize a Méliès film right away. If you see the floor was very typical, we call it parquet in French, wooden, floor, and you recognize it instantly. So that's the career of Georges Méliès.
But Serge, we all know you as archivist, as the person who has been working always for decades now about Méliès and finding films, putting out DVDs, and you have dedicated your life to save Méliès. Where is this fascination coming from, actually, I wonder?
Well, first of all, I must say that I'm a head with two brains, 4 arms, and 4 legs. At Lobster, we are 2 crazy people. One is Eric Lange, the other one is me, and we are 2 sides of the same person. And we work together on everything, and every documentary we direct together. And really, we are like the 20 fingers on one hand. Actually, I always thought, well, to answer your question, Georges Méliès went out of business in 1913, and he was to be ejected from his house that was seized by Pathé, and he stayed there for 10 years. And in 1923, Méliès was ejected from his house, which was also his studio and his storage place. And because at the time there were no archives or cinematheque, Méliès had no other choice than putting all his negatives, all his prints, all his sets, all his costumes in a big stack in his garden and light a match. So in a few minutes, an entire career of about 17 years went up in smoke. When the archives established in the mid-30s, of course, there were one in Belgium by Ledoux, Langlois in Paris, and Le MoMA in the United States and Denmark. Those archives were all built on the idea that so many films were lost because they had been destroyed or because no one wanted to circulate them anymore, because storage cost so much, because everything, so that at the time, either they would make an archive or those films would go for good. And fortunately for all of us, they made archives and they gathered everything they could, but they couldn't gather that much. They could gather only the films that were identified, that were located in special places, laboratories, in production companies, maybe some screening rooms, some old theaters, in the booth, there would be old cans. So they went everywhere and looked for the films and realized that actually there was still 70% of those films missing. So what do? And the only thing to do is actually to keep searching. And because no logical track leads to a Méliès film that would be abandoned in a barn or found by pure chance in a flea market, the only way to find those films is to dedicate your entire life and ask everyone you meet every minute of your life, do you have cans somewhere? And that's exactly what I do. When I do a show with films that are recently or not recently restored, that were lost at some point, at the end I say, hey, those films you could see because there were so many archives or so many cinematheques that gathered them and restored them. And maybe you have those 50, 60, 70%, one of those lost films that we don't know that survives, and you have it, and you don't even know you have it. But if you don't come to us, then that film may end up in the bin. And then, the garbage men are our worst competition. I'm sure they are much strongly organized than we are in the world of archives, and they find much more prints than we do, but they destroyed them. That's their job.
Actually, we did have in the Netherlands one case where the garbage man found the film in the garbage and brought it to us, to the archive.
Really? Oh.
That's nice, no?
You see, let me tell you a little story. Charlie Chaplin in 1952 is refused access to the United States, where he had been living for about 40 years. So what he decides to do, he says, okay, the hell with America, I sell my studio and all the negatives and prints and everything that is in the studio, I send them to silver scrap, which means destruction of the films and melting of the film, so you get the silver of the emulsion on the film. So Chaplin himself orders destruction of his films, and the garbage man goes there with a huge truck, loads all those treasures that are all the outtakes, some negatives, many prints of the original cuts, working prints of Charlie Chaplin's, put them on the truck, and then goes out of the studio. And do you think he goes to the scrap? No, he found a collector and made some kind of totally obscure deal with a man that you would regard as a thief. But at the same time, that thief, by doing that, saved all the outtakes of the films of the teens by Charlie Chaplin, among many other things. So that's the problem. The people who have the films today do not know that they have precious films. Maybe you who are watching that program now, you have cans in an old cupboard, in a closet, or I don't know, wherever. And you say, well, they were left here by my grandfather. Where did he get them? What are they? I don't know. But next time I need space for my books, for my old records of the Beatles, I'll junk that old rusty stuff and put my records instead. Well, by junking the stuff, you may junk a lost film by Hitchcock or the Marx Brothers. There are missing films of Chaplin or Buster Keaton, so many missing films by the big geniuses of cinema. We recently restored, a few days ago actually, a film by Jean Renoir called Rules of the Game, which is one of the most important films in France with the Cinémathèque Française. And actually, it took so long to restore the film from so many elements found here and there. No one had seen the complete version until now. And can you think that film that has been run so many times is lost? Well, that fascination for lost films is probably what led me to Méliès. At the time, there were about 140 films of Méliès that had been identified, mostly by Madeleine, his granddaughter who passed away a few years ago. And I thought, this is so unusual, so magic, so fascinating, actually. The guy was so talented. He invented so many tricks. I mean, he had something much more simple than this, than a telephone, but he could do anything with it. So I thought, okay, let's try to discover who Méliès was, and most of all, after finding all those prints or reconstructing all the Méliès films, share them, show them to people who don't know who he was. So, of course, you've seen Hugo, the Martin Scorsese film that tells the story of Georges Méliès. But before Hugo, only a few people knew Georges Méliès, and most of them knew Georges Méliès by that image of the moon with the rocket in the eye. So that's the image everyone knows. But who has actually seen the film? The Trip to the Moon was the first blockbuster of cinema. Mm-hmm. At some point, it was lost. So you never can tell. And that's one of the contradictions with our job of film searchers, film restorers, film archivists, is that our only aim is not to be mentioned anywhere. What we want is to be the missing link between Georges Méliès and the audience of today, because his films are modern and they are eternally young. And the name of Elif and Serge and is, I mean, who cares? When I go, I want to have left behind me as many films as possible by Georges Méliès in the best restoration possible. And that's what the Méliès mystery is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, also what you're saying is totally right. Even I am now surprised to hear from you that he made more than 500 films. But because some of these films, but only a few of these films, are always around, they have become iconic, they're always referenced by others. And so you just tend to think, there's a lot of work already done with Méliès films. But you can get it, you can buy a DVD, that kind of thing, without realizing that there are still, hundreds of them probably, lost today. Because you met, I mean, you were quite close, I guess, with Madeleine when she was alive.
Yes, of course, we know each other very well, of course. So, there's the first problem with Méliès is that at the beginning of cinema, there were no credits. There was no stars, there's never said the title, and it never said the end. It was just images. So for a few years, Méliès shot views, just like the Lumière brothers or a few others. So how can we know these were shot by Méliès and others were not? So it's obvious that the place where we will find the most Méliès films in the future is actually in the archives, where they have not been identified as Méliès prints. So that's the first thing. But the Méliès mystery is about something really tricky. Méliès invented, as I said, so many things. He invented more or less color in cinema. He's among the very first who actually painted, original black and white film with brushes to make the image hand-colored appear on the screen. He's also among the first to have invented narration. Basically, the films of Méliès since 1900 were dedicated to be shown with the image and a narrator. So like the Benchi, in Japan. And the idea was that it would give some meaning to the image and make the program more global. There would be sound, there would be music, and there would be image. That's why sometimes we see long Méliès films and we realize it's long, it's boring, I don't get it. But you don't get it because you don't have the narration that goes with it. And
in fact, you do this, no?
Of course.
In some of your shows, you are the narrator.
Yeah, and all of a sudden,
original scripts? Did you?
Well, there was no original scripts. There were just recommendations on the catalogs. It described what was happening, and they said, "Well, say what you want, but this is what you should explain." And so probably some narrators would be shy and say, "Oh, so he's going to the moon." And they arrive on the moon. And if you have me, wow, they arrive on the moon, explosions! It's very crazy. And I like things to be crazy. So he invented that. He invented, of course, all the tricks we have today. He invented them in their original form. But sometimes he invented political cinema. He did a film about the Dreyfus Affair in 1899. He invented publicity. He invented live cinema. Listen to that story. It's a film called The Coronation of Edward VII. Charles Urban, an English producer, wanted to show the coronation of the future king in England at the same time of the coronation. He asked his friend Georges Méliès in France to film, of course, on the set with actors to film the coronation. He made duplication by the hundreds of this film and spread the films among the theater and told them on the day of the coronation in the morning at 10, you show the film and you say, this is the coronation of Edward VII at the same time it is happening. But there was a problem. The problem is that actually Edward VII got sick and the coronation was delayed by 2 weeks, but the information was not sent to all the theaters. So many theaters showed the coronation 2 weeks before it actually happened. So he invented like viewing the future. Yeah, you see, that's how Méliès was.
So the French witnessed the coronation of the British king before the British could.
Of course, and in England. So the Méliès mystery is about a magic trick that was played on Méliès without him knowing. And you know, the magician, what they do is they say, okay, watch me, I disappear. Poof, they disappear. And then 10 seconds later, they come in through the door or through the floor and, hey, I'm back. All right, so that's Méliès. What Méliès did in 1923 is that he burned his negatives, all his negatives. We know for sure that the 520 negatives that he had shot in his entire life were there, that they were put on that stack and that they were burned and turned to dust. So that's for sure. So we knew for a fact that we would never see a film from a camera negative again, because of course, there's only one negative that goes through the camera. Then in 2007, by pure chance, we came across half of a negative in America of a film called The Magic Cauldron. And listen, how is it possible that we came across a negative in America where that negative was burnt in France? So we checked and rechecked and rechecked, and I can confirm for sure that that negative was burnt in France and that it does not survive. Yes, but how can a film not survive and survive at the same time? That's the thing for magicians. They don't give you their tricks. And Méliès, who had disappeared in 1923, all of a sudden had reappeared, half of a negative, in 2007. Then we followed the track. Then we found the most unbelievable story that leads to the discovery of, listen to this, 80 camera negatives. 80 camera negatives that we are now one by one restoring with the French National Center of Cinema, the Library of Congress, and the Motion Picture Academy. We just start, but we had this idea of producing that film, The Méliès Mystery, to explain who Méliès was, show examples of what he did, I mean, the most fantastic images, have this story told by everyone who went through it, including Georges Méliès himself, because we found a recording of his own voice. And now we're starting to restore the films, and we did the first screening or the first restored negative last Monday, and there'll be 80. So there will be one every once in a while. We're basically working full-time on those films. The explanation, of course, I will not give you, because you have to watch the Méliès Mystery. That's all the trick. It is so jaw-dropping that you don't even believe your eyes. I mean, chances that those 80 negatives would arrive through us are about 0. But they are here. And who are the heroes of that story? Well, you know, a guy who had those films in his basement, the producer of Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, Gregory Peck, we didn't even know what those films were. It's just okay. So watch the film, but yeah.
No, I mean, I think we have to explain that in order to show a film or restore a film, you don't necessarily need to have the negative. Thankfully, so the films that were around before this time, before this discovery, were around because they were showing prints. No, they were projection prints that were used around the world, and we can still take that positive film and make new duplications, make new negatives. So these are the films that were maybe most popular and sold to different countries. So that is how we already knew what we knew, and we could see what we could see from Méliès. But then finding a negative is, of course, is like finding the Holy Grail, no, in the archivist world. So this is the excitement about this incredible discovery, that your film, your documentary, is showing, but also kind of teasing us, no? Because you finish the film by saying, the work has just begun to restore these films. So actually, it's like, I guess, years to come, no?
Yeah. It'll take years. But I mean, The Impossible Voyage, which is the film that we just showed, is so unbelievable. You can feel that it has been shot yesterday. We try not to, of course, over clean, as we say, do too many digital restoration, but those negatives do not need restoration. They are just perfect.
Exactly. They are probably still clean in the sense that they were only used once or twice to make one positive print or multiple positive prints at once, and then just distribute around.
We must explain because I realize that Elif and I know this, but it may not be so familiar. Like in photo, for those who do silver printing, when you make a film, it's always, let's say, professionally, it's always on a negative stock. The film that goes in the camera is negative. And every time you print, you change the, let's say, polarity. From a negative, you can do a positive print, which is a print that you can show in cinema. And so the negative means that the white will be black and the black will be white. And you invert when you do the positive. So the negative is used to do the prints, but you cannot screen a negative because the negative is inverted. You do not see a real image. So what you screen in the cinema is a positive, and the people who wanted to show Méliès films had to go to Méliès and buy for the life of the print a print. And Méliès would put his negative, manufacture a print, give it to the exhibitor, whomever it was, and that was it. So when he destroyed all his negatives, which is the source with all the information, the sharpness, the quality and everything, he destroyed what he had in his hands. But all the prints that had been sold to so many people who didn't know their prints may be the last one surviving. All those prints had been scattered all around the world. And every time in the world someone finds a print of Méliès, it's like finding a piece of the puzzle. And it's so fun because the community of archivists, whenever we find a Méliès film, it spreads like, I found a new Méliès, which one, what number, and everyone wants to see it, and it's really unbelievable. So
each print is also really unique. I mean, these films are also very early. The positive prints that we're finding, are for example, colored and so on in such a way that they are spectacular. So even if we only find a few meters, like Serge is saying, it's always exciting. And of course, we all go to Serge to hear, how many other versions of this film are there, or does it exist at all? So actually, my question is now, we were talking about these 80 negatives, and they're also complete, no? They are the complete versions of the films, or not?
Well, some of them are incomplete because you should know that the stock, that the plastic that they used at the time, called nitrate cellulosis, has a big problem of, first of all, being very flammable. So if you have films at your place, do not try to light a match. It's like it's dynamite. So do not try to see if they are old and if they burn. You just put them in a cold and dry place and call an archive or a specialist, and they will very gladly go to you. But the other problem is that the film decays. It's like, like an old plastic or like anything old. All of a sudden it cracks, then it turns to a kind of glue, and then it disappears. So someone may have put the film in a very good condition in a can, and you come back 20 years later, and all that's left in the can is powder. There is a very famous story. It'll take 2 minutes, but you'll love this one. We've restored The Trip to the Moon, the 1902 very famous film by Georges Méliès, from a hand-colored print that was discovered in Barcelona by the Cineteca de Catalunya. It was in 1999, and actually it took 12 years, so it took a long time. The end, the last scene, lasts about 1 minute, and only 20 seconds survive of it. On any print in the world, the 40 last seconds are gone. In 2003, there was a big heat wave, at least in Paris, but I think it was worldwide. And a few months later, a woman calls me and said, well, I have films that I would like to sell. Would you be interested in buying them? Well, what are they? I don't know. They are sticky. Oh, sticky. That means it's nitrate. If it's nitrate, it's very old. It's pre-1955. Well, let's give it a look. So I tell to that woman, well, yeah, come over. And so she comes over with a plastic bag, and there are 3 rolls. 2 little rolls that are of mediocre interest, obviously, and a bigger roll that is entirely white, totally decayed. Only the middle is still brownish. So I say, well, what is this? She says, well, that film was starting to melt. So I thought that by putting it on my window sill, it would dry because of the heat. But actually, she didn't dry it. She roasted her print, and of course, it turned entirely white. Except on the top of the middle, she had put one of the 2 little rolls, and the little roll protected only the middle. So I said, well, okay, what you have here is a piece of garbage, but let me check what you have in the middle. And I take the center, and I watch the frame. It was The Trip to the Moon, and it was the complete last shot. That I knew those images. I said, wow, okay, how much do you want? And she said, well, I want 50,000 euros. What? Well, I have to pay for the studies of my 2 sons, and I thought this is a treasure, so I want 50,000 euros. I said, listen, I can't give you 1,000 euros, only because it's that very specific film. Frankly, nobody else will give you 20 euros for that. But I give you the names of everyone I know who may be interested in films, and you call them, and if they are not interested, after a while, you come back to me, and my offer will stand. She says, okay. I said,
but in the meantime, don't put the film on the windowsill.
No. I asked them, but can you give me your phone number or your name? No. No. And she goes away. I don't know who she is. I don't have her phone number. And I think this is the last time I hear of that woman. But actually, she called everyone and said that she had those sticky things. I don't know who she called, actually. Maybe she called no one. And 1 month later, she calls me back. Mr. Bromberg, I've studied your offer, and I think it's a fair offer. So I'm ready to accept it. Yes. So she comes back, and I have prepared everything, and you want a drink and everything. Oh, it's so nice. And then she pulls all the films, and so you have the 2 little rolls, and you have that big roll, which is The Trip to the Moon, which is all white from the first to the last image. In 1 month, it had entirely decayed, and the last 40 seconds are still lost today.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh, that's such a sad story. But
it is very sad, but that tells you that you never can tell. The secret of happiness is not to have what you want. It's to want what you have. Mm-hmm. We will never have the 500 negatives of Méliès, but we will have some of the films, and who could have imagined 30 years ago that those negatives will still be there? And maybe there is a complete print of The Trip to the Moon somewhere at my neighbor. He doesn't know he has it. I don't know he has it. And one day we will meet and he'll tell me. That's why we're here. That's what we do all the time. Try to find a missing link.
Yeah, I actually noticed like I always focus on the romantic aspect of this inquiry in lost treasures, but there's a strong business aspect as well when you're
Business?
making this deal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very simple. That's very simple. Yes, the secret to stay young is to eat healthy, exercise daily, and lie about your age. So basically, that's what we do. We keep finding films. We store the films in most of the major archives because, as you've realized, the question is not who has the film. It's not a matter of physical ownership. It's a problem of having them stored well, kept well, and shared well in perpetuity. In 20, 30, 40 years, I may not be here. So I don't want my children to jump the films I found, which is why all the films end up in major archives one way or another. But the business side of it is, of course, a very bumpy subject. I made a business school when I was young, very ultra high business school, and I could have become a banker, which is deadly boring, or a specialist in marketing of sodas or shoes, which is also deadly boring. I decided to go in silent films, which was not recommended by my school. They obviously said, well, this is not even a niche market. There's no dog, there's no niche, there's nothing. There's nothing, but there's my love for those films. And believe me, when I screen those films, people have they smile, they become young again. I mean, I only show 5% or 10% of the films we find, because those are the films that are still modern today or that can still be understood by modern audiences. But actually, what I like is to share. Restoring the film is a mere technical business. Restoring the audience is much more ambitious. And that's what we're all trying to do. And I know Elif agrees with me. We've discussed it many, many times. So the business aspect goes with using the films, showing them, screening them worldwide. When you make a documentary like the Méliès mystery, you have Arte paying for part of the price of that film. Then you have TCM and HBO Max in the United States that bought it, and probably and you showing it, of course, in Turkey. So at the end of the day, many people will have discovered our project through this. It will lead to something else. And, over the years, people know us. When they need images, they call us, and it helps finance a company that is not huge, but we're about 25 people living here. We have machines, we have screening rooms, we have we make a living. I don't have a Jaguar or a Tesla. I have a small Peugeot. Sorry, it's a small Peugeot. But I don't care, as long as it takes me from one place to the other. That's all I'm requiring from a car. For a film, it's different. I would go to the other end of the world to find a few images of a new Méliès films. That's for sure.
And talking about these people wanting to sell the films that they found and so on, the old collectors or even people who we see nowadays also films being offered like on eBay and so on internationally, people trying to sell a really small roll of something that they found or they have, but it's always kind of wrong because they think that for example, a Chaplin film must be worth millions, so they ask for a lot of money, whereas that's the wrong assumption because that film is so popular and everybody knows it. Actually, it exists. So we are not looking for that as archivists. We have it already. The people who find these films, they cannot know what we are actually looking for because, we are looking for these very strange odd bits, films that nobody has ever talked or seen about, so that is the very strange thing that we notice. that people are asking like, oh, I need $10,000 for this film. And we're like, well, I mean, we have 5 prints of that film in our archive. Who cares? But they care, of course, because they like the film, they like the actor, they like the actress. So there's a whole misconception. And the other thing is, of course, is restoring a film. I mean, like finding a film is one thing, but restoring a film can be very, very costly. So that is where the real, the money problem, let's say, begins. So even if a film is like 3 minutes, to restore it, sometimes you have to have such a great budget that you have to find people willing to invest in that.
And Elif, we must also say that when we find films, most of the time there are fragments or very damaged films. The beginning and the ends of reels are always very damaged. Sometimes the films are in many cans, but one is missing, so they are incomplete. So restoring a film is also a problem of information between many archivists or collectors or film search, people who are dedicated to this. For example, we are currently restoring a film that is from 1937 called The Robber Symphony. And it's a film that I thought was completely lost. So we found a print, very bad quality, and then I realized that there are a print here and a print there, but none of them is complete. And that actually the Eye Film Institute, where Elif is working, has been gathering material already 15 years ago, which I didn't know because the film was shown nowhere. And when I called Elif and said, well, I'm working on this, wow, a better version with a better restoration, because of course technologies have made major progress in the last 15 years. It's like working together. We really have our main problem is to bring the audience in the theaters. Mm-hmm. And when you show a Méliès film, instantly that they will come back, because they'll realize that there are not old films. I mean, Mozart is not old music, or Shakespeare is not old theater. It's just pure genius, and genius doesn't get old. Of course, it gets out of fashion. But, imagine, you want a wine of Romanée Conti of 1976? Oh, it's very old. Well, that's how wine gets better, is by getting old. So, that's part of sharing the magic. And Méliès is magic 100%.
And I also wanted to say one thing that I learned by watching your documentary, that Méliès was actually the son of a shoemaker. Is that right?
I also gonna say that.
And he also married to a daughter of another shoemaker.
Yes.
And this is like, the location of Beykoz Kundura. It's the old shoe factory. So in a way,
he ended up in a shoe factory again.
Belongs in this way.
Yeah, that's quite funny.
Well, the story of the shoe factory is that Méliès was not interested, of course, in this, and he sold his share of the shoe factory to his brothers, and then bought that magic theater. And the shoe company actually went bankrupt in 1901 or 1902, and while Gaston, his brother, was handling and running the shoe company. So Gaston was out of business and out of a job in 1903 when something happened, when Gaston became a key person in resolving the mystery. And that's only because he was available. He had no more job. Then he did what he did, and we'll find it.
That's the other thing I was thinking about, because this documentary is also about the other Méliès, no? Yes. So the brother, you already, Erika and you made another documentary, which I would definitely also recommend, The Other Chaplain, no? About Chaplin's older brother. Very, very interesting. And as I was watching this one, Mr. Méliès, I was also thinking, this is also a little bit, has the potential of being, or maybe there will be another, who knows, documentary showing the other Méliès, no?
Well, yes, the problem is that the other Méliès is really a loser, a total loser. You cannot imagine.
It also stories.
Yeah, but a loser with big dreams. And he actually he was a bit older than Georges. His name was Gaston, and he left. So he went he did what he did for the in America, that you'll find out in the mystery. And when the whole story ended, he decided to go in the far island in the Far East, and came back to France with a tropical disease and passed away in 1915. So his life was very short, and of course he was in the shadow of his brother Georges. So no one has ever heard of Gaston. There was a film by Raphael Millet telling the story of Gaston going to these islands and shooting a film, but it's such a major disaster. Whenever that man went, he did disasters. I love glorious losers. If you lose, well, lose big. And he lost super big.
Actually, I was like have impression like he is the business mind in this Méliès collaboration, but apparently with his story as well, we understand that he's not that much successful in business either now.
Well, you know, Gaston was not successful in business, and Georges was not successful in business either.
Yeah.
Yeah. When cinema was actually changing every day, they were, you know, in the early days of the 1900s, Gaumont, Pathé would send reporters in the north, in the east, in the west. They would film the real world, just like Lumière had done. And so after a few years and the tricks that Méliès had invented, people got fed up by Méliès, you know, little devils, things appearing, smokes, explosions. Well, you've seen one. It's not that you've seen one, you've seen them all, but when you've seen 15, you beg for it to stop, you know, it's really always the same film. So the story of Méliès is that in 1910, people, of course, he didn't have an industry. He had only one studio. He was a one-man band. He did the scripts, the shooting. He was the actor of all of his films and so on. So people were not interested anymore. And in 1910, he went broke for the first time. And he went to Pathé in 1912 and told Pathé, I have 4 or 5 images, ideas. If you give me the money to do those films, I promise you they will be a smash. So Pathé said, okay, but I want your house as a collateral. So if the money I give you is lost in those films, I want to recoup my investment by getting your house. And Méliès said, of course, no problem. And with the success you'll have, you'll see. And of course, Méliès did 4 films that were Méliès films, just the same as he had always done. And they were not success, to say the least. The longest one was The Conquest of the North Pole, where you could see planes flying for 6 or 7 minutes. I mean, who would want to see that? It made no sense. So, of course, the films bombed, and Méliès had to give his house to Pathé. But we were in 1914, the First World War, and Méliès entertained soldiers and turned his house and his studio into a theater, but he never filmed another film again. And in 1923, Pathé seized the house and it was sold at auction. And of course, that's how Méliès had to get rid of his films. Yeah, he was not a very good businessman. I'm not a good businessman either, but to go back to your former answer, but as George Bernard Shaw would say, the secret of success is to last long enough. Well, Lobster has lasted 36 years. So I guess in a way, I don't have a fancy car, but you may call me a success just because I lost 36 years.
And you found hundreds of films,
Yeah.
not more. You know, you are a hero for the archival.
Definitely a hunter, treasure hunter.
Yes, but
and hero.
You know, Elif knows that yesterday or the day before yesterday, I'm not betraying secrets. Elif told me I have a friend who was looking for that film that I think you have found somewhere. She found it on a list or some kind of database. I mean, 10 minutes later, the guy who was interested had a scan of the film sent to him instantly, because he's probably the only man in the entire world who will be interested in Zinel. Who knows Zinel? No one. And I must betray that thing. Elif is probably the only person interested in the actress who played Cunegonde in the 1910s, and she was going everywhere. Do you have Cunegonde film? And who is Cunegonde? And who is the actress? And I need to. And she would go anywhere, asking everyone, "What do you know about Cunegonde?"
By the way,
yeah,
yeah,
and she knows a lot now, and I found through that. But at the same time, maybe 10 years ago, Elif told me, we found a can of a Cyrano de Bergerac film. It's one reel out of 12, but we found it. I don't know what it is. Well, guess what? We're restoring the film now. And I called Elif and said, didn't you tell me 10 years ago that you found one reel of that 1923 films? You may think we are crazy. We may be crazy. We probably are crazy, but think of how many films we're saving for the future with our, let's say, neurosis. So I'm proud of this neurosis. I can formalize it. I can speak about my neurosis without shame on internet to you and to your viewers, because I think my neurosis is useful.
Definitely. Well, we are super lucky then, we watched and we also pass this on next generations, you find them, you complete them. I think this completing process in restoration is one of the prominent that arouse curiosity on me as well.
And it's like you make a huge jigsaw puzzle of 1,000 pieces and you assemble them all, and at the end it's there, but one piece fell on the floor, and where is it? And there's just one piece missing. And where are you going to find it? And you may look for it for 10 years. And one day, I got it. So, by finding prints all over the world that are incomplete, that are so damaged, with the joining all those archivists and all this material that survived incomplete or in lesser quality throughout the world, I mean, our ancestors in film archiving have built the possibility that we have today of joining those elements and restoring the films. There is a very famous film by a famous comedian, Max Linder, one of the inspirations to Charlie Chaplin. And Max Linder made his last film in 1924, and that film got lost, and because tragedy and so on. Anyway, in 1993, the Belgian Cinematheque tried to make a reconstruction of it, and they asked for the help of all the archives throughout the world, and they managed to make a 43-minute version that was unwatchable. And they said, well, it's impossible. I mean, they've done their best, but it was really impossible. Well, we've resumed that with their help, and Elif had 2 cans of that film, which is far from being the complete film, and we finally completed it. So it took time.
With the help of 11 archives, no?
In 11 archives, 11 elements. There were shots in Argentina. There were shots in Ukraine. There were shots in London. There is a scene that is missing, but it is in the trailer that was found in London, and we have half of the shot. It's a thrilling life. To tell you the truth, it's really an amazing life. Okay, but the best moment is when you put the file in the projector, it's not film anymore, and you show it to the audience, and the audience gets moved, or they laugh, and they come out of it and say, wow, this is the joy. Unbelievable. Taming a 1914 dinosaur with a whip and a pumpkin today. Who is this guy? And it's magic. It's magic. It's eternal youth. Where else? Nowhere. Voila.
Yeah, cinema is overall a magic. I remember the first day that we opened our projector, I had seen that lamp, and then all the light haze you see in the dark, and you really feel like your heart beats, and this is different feeling, definitely.
Totally. Well, you can see the films in streaming, but there's nothing like theatrical. ever.
Yeah. So I'm like, lastly, maybe I'm wondering, like, if you have any message, both of you actually, a question to young audience, like who are newly discovered this notion of cultural heritage in audiovisual, was the notion of like restoring film, who discover early cinema. So what would you say to them, like a message maybe?
Elif, your call.
Yeah, I mean, my message is, I think, probably my motto for myself all the time. Be curious, watch things, look at things. Don't take anybody's word for anything. Don't believe in other people that are telling you. Believe your eyes. Try to watch and find out more about things. Just keep being curious.
Yeah, I think that's a great advice, because the problem is that the streaming platforms and bring you to see always the same kind of film, always the major films, the blockbusters, or films that have left some trace in the memory of humankind. But think of how many films have been shot, and among those films, how many films are totally ignored because no one surviving was there to watch them. That's what we're doing. So take the advice of people who know. Be open-minded. If someone you know tells you, I've seen that film amazing from 1947, don't think, oh, 1947 is very, very old. Don't think that. At the time, it was not old. And the only reason the film was made was to have people go to the theater, pay for their ticket, be amazed, so that they would come back the week after. Of course, fashions change. So many films cannot be understood today. But so many, I mean, when you watch a Lumière film of 1896 and you watch Africa, filmed by a man who had taken a boat to go there and go in the wild jungle, and you're there, and you travel not only in imagination, but you travel in time. You learn as much as you can about what the world was like, what the audience wanted to watch at the time, and so on. You know, it's a very famous man called Kevin Brownlow that most of the archivists know. He's a friend and a man who restored Napoleon, the major Abel Gance film. Every time we show a film, people say, oh, you know, it's a bit too overclean, it's a bit too short, I know another version, and blah, blah, blah. It's not like in the old days. Well, you know, in the old days, in 1914, for example, when Charlie Chaplin started doing films, you wanted to go to a cinema? Cinemas were not cinemas at the time. There were no real building, or at least very few. You would enter in a tent or in any building. You would sit on wooden chairs. There would be no air conditioning. The projector would make a lot of noise. In front of you, you would have a woman with a big hat. So you would only see her hat, not the image. And of course, at the time, people would not wash every day. So the problem would be the smell and also the fleas. So between the shows, when people go out, the exhibitor would take some fly talks to kill the pox and everything, and would just put fly talks in the theater. So when you would enter in the theater, you would feel the heat, and the smell would jump at you. It would be just awful. And then you sit, and then you watch the hat of that woman in front of you. It's like, oh, what am I doing here? So do not try to go back in 1914. Just watch the Buster Keaton films, the Marx Brothers, the Jean Renoir, the Satyajit Ray films, today, in a comfortable chair, with everything we know about these persons, with the best projectors, with the best light. Of course, they may not be 35mm print, they may be digital print, but did you ever realize there were 35mm in the booth? Not really. Okay, just watch the film for what it is. And then you'll find out that what the 20th century has invented, cinema, is so much bigger than any streaming website you can imagine. So much bigger. So be curious and go to the movies.
Well, storytelling is timeless. So that's important to discover more and more. Thank you very much indeed for your time. We really encourage our audience to watch Méliès' Mystery and to explore beyond the trip to the moon, you know, the real magician Méliès, and hope they can also be more curious and care about cultural heritage of cinema. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.